Starting with trigonometric ratios, what we're talking about is on your calculator, we have sine, cos, and tan. I know you think it's sin, cos, and tan, but it's sine, cosine, and tangent is what they stand for. So when we're looking at trig ratios, we're always going to look at our triangles, and we need to label our triangles as the first step. Okay, and it's always a right angle for right now, so we can find our hypotenuse by using that. We're always looking directly across from the right angle. Now the other thing that we need to do is we need to establish what angle we're using. So here we'll use angle A. Now across from angle A would be the opposite. Okay, the last thing that we're looking at is the adjacent. Okay, so the three things that we're looking at is hypotenuse, which is across from the right angle, opposite, which is across from the angle we're looking at, and then adjacent. Okay, so to use our trig ratios, we need to remember the term SOHCAHTOA. Now, it's going to sound funny at first, but everybody in high school after grade 10 knows this. SOHCAHTOA means sine of an angle. Okay, we use theta. In this case, it would be sine A is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. Cos of theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. And tan of theta is equal to opposite over adjacent. So when we look at those trig ratios, it's what ratio is it, and then what divided by what each time. Okay, so if we were looking at a question like this, the first thing that we need to recognize is we need all three sides. So this says find sine, cos, and tan for each acute angle. So that would mean for both A and C. So we're going to do A here, and then we'll do C over here. Okay, so we're going to have sine, cos, and tan for each of them. So sine is always going to be opposite over hypotenuse, cos is adjacent, tan is opposite over adjacent. Well, we need to find out what this side is. We'll call it side C. Okay, so that's a little bit confusing because when we do our Pythagorean theorem, side C we know is normally the longest side. But here we could say that C squared equals 26 squared, the longest side, minus 24 squared, which we get C squared is equal to 100, and then C is equal to 10. So now I know that this is 10, so what I'm going to do is I'll write 10 in there instead of C. And so we can work through these, and we'll do angle A first. So from angle A, and I'll do angle A in blue, we've got our hypotenuse is always going to be here. Our opposite would be 24, and then our adjacent, so we'd have opposite over here, and adjacent would be right here. Okay, so when we're working through this, we're going to have sine first. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so sine of A is equal to 24 over 26. Cos of A, adjacent over hypotenuse, is 10 over 26. And then tan of A is opposite over adjacent, so 24 over 10. Now, if we're looking at C, all that's going to change is our hypotenuse is the same. Our opposite is now over here, so now this is opposite. This becomes adjacent. So now we're going to have sine of C is going to be equal to 10 over 26. Cos of C is going to be equal to, not 10, 24 over 26. And tan of C is going to be equal to 10 over 24. Kind of just flips everything. Okay, those are the trig ratios. We haven't calculated anything yet, but a trigonometric function is just actually showing a ratio between two sides. And then we use those buttons on our calculator to actually find out what they're equal to. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the answers for these next questions, and you're going to have to find out the keystrokes on the calculator that you're using to make sure that it matches up. Now the first thing you need to do is make sure your calculator is in degrees. So it should say a D at the top, or DRG, or DEG. The other options are radians or gradients, so some sort of R or G at the top. And then you're either going to push sine 51 equals, or 51 and then sine, and then sometimes equals to get these values. But you need to get used to your calculator. Now again here, For these ones, it's a little bit different, but again, I'm going to give you the answer. We have to undo our sine function. So on the calculator, you're going to hit shift or second, and it's going to undo those values. And again, you need to figure out the keystrokes to get your answers. So here we would have 50. This is undoing it. It's called the inverse of these values. So we're inverting them. Whoops. So then this is 66. That's a 6. And then finally, the inverse of tan. And again, all this is pushing the shift or second button on your calculator, and it should give you all of these values. Okay, looking at these examples, we always want to write out what we're doing. So I'll do the first example, and you can try the second one. So for the first one, I need to label my triangle. I've got my hypotenuse. The angle we're dealing with is here. So I've got over here, I've got opposite. And then we don't really have anything at adjacent, so we're not going to use that side. We're using opposite and hypotenuse. So opposite and hypotenuse is sine, so we're using this. So what we're going to have is sine theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. Then we're going to have sine 32 equals x over 14.3. All we have to do is rearrange this formula. So I have to multiply the 14.3 up. And the way we write it is always the number first and then sine 32. So this says 14.3 times sine 32. I would do the trig part first. So sine 32 is going to give me 0.5299 times 14.3. And so I get around, this says find the value of x. I'm going to round it to one decimal. So we get 7.6 centimeters. I want you to try the second part of that. And then finding the angle, we're going to do it the same way. We're going to label this hypotenuse. We're going to use that angle. So this would be opposite. And then this would be adjacent. So we know we have the adjacent and the hypotenuse. Well, going back here, adjacent and hypotenuse. That's cos. So we're going to have cos of theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse. That's going to be cos theta equals 12 over 13. And then theta, we have to undo the cos. It's not dividing by cos, it's doing the inverse. So we have 12 over 13. We put this into our calculator and you push the shift button, and you should be able to get 22.6 or 23 degrees. Again, I'm going to let you try B on your own.